So you got your decision, you do not like it, and you want to know what the next steps are. Well, welcome aboard. You're one of many veterans who has now gotten a decision that they did not like from the VA. I'm going to tell you what all your appeal options are, including some brutal, uncomfortable truths as we go along, and I'll break it all down for you in this video. Let's get started. Let's get that first uncomfortable conversation out of the way. So the very first thing is your mindset. Look at it from the VA's perspective in the sense of, are you eligible for this benefit? Is your disease or condition even on the rating schedule? Is there any evidence whatsoever to get to that 50-50, that chance that what you are claiming was service connected? Most things are denied based on service connection, so we'll start there. On the other hand, if you're a personality type, and I know it's not you, but maybe you know someone, if you have the personality type like you just want it and you're just going to keep on throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks, unfortunately those claims and those appeals are in the VA by the thousands and they slow down everybody else. But the big thing is mindset. Our goal here is to get a fair rating, not to just keep taking anything that might be a 0, 10, or 20% and inflate it to 100%. That is not what this channel is about. That's not what I'm about. And if you have any integrity, and I think you do, that's not what you're about. So now that we have our mindset right, let's press on with how to do an appeal and explore all the options, find out what's right for you. Your 3 appeal options. It starts with the date of your decision letter. So look at your VA letter, whatever the date is of that notification or decision letter, that gives you 1 year to use all 3 options, okay? By the way, a good starting point for you is to go to va.gov at this URL, and it walks you through the 3 appeal options that we'll discuss here, and it also gives you the forms and other downloadables that might help you as you go, if you're doing this on your own. All right, let's get started with number 1. Number 1, the supplemental claim that is completed on a form VA 20-0995, the supplemental claim. Simple form. You just put down the date of the VA decision letter, the issue that you are challenging in the appeal, and if you have any new and relevant evidence, you need to attach it to that form. Now, new and relevant evidence means something that the VA has already identified as something missing. Let's go back to your decision letter. Toward the very end of your letter, it'll say favorable findings. So if the favorable finding is the fact that they recognize that you have a diagnosed condition, but they denied the condition because it lacked service connection in their view, then what would new and relevant evidence look like? Well, it could be a couple things. One, there might be something in the service treatment record that they overlooked. It might be an incomplete record. Maybe you have a record from when you were in service. More often than not, the best option is going to be to get a medical opinion from a doctor who knows you, who's familiar with what you did in the military. And that medical opinion is often referred to as a nexus letter. So the winning appeals typically in my world are supplemental claims that go back to the VA with a nexus letter attached, and that is new and relevant evidence. One other quirky thing that could be considered new and relevant evidence would be if a claim was started before there was a change in law. You've all heard of the PACT Act. If you haven't, the PACT Act is essentially the VA policy and law surrounding exposure claims. Veterans who were exposed in Vietnam, Camp Lejeune, any other MOS specific type of exposures, unique situations that'll come up in the future as the law continues to evolve. So if the law changes, you could have something that was not presumptive, not usually granted by the VA with very little friction because they kind of conceded that Agent Orange was the cause of all these conditions, and then they add a new condition to Agent Orange. And in this case, the client might be a Vietnam vet. It might say, I've had hypertension all my life, but it was denied 2 or 3 years ago. But now that hypertension is on that list, is considered under PACT Act as a presumptive, I want to provide a notation saying reconsider under PACT Act. So I've done that in supplemental claims, and it's worked out fine. You're basically reminding the VA of the current law. But what happens if you have no new and relevant evidence? You built the best case you could. You and your VSO clearly and comprehensively identified all these supporting documents, scanned it, sent it in with the form, and the VA still denied it. That happens. Sometimes the VA makes a bad call. In that case, you want to use what I would call a higher level review. A higher level review is done on VA form 200996. On that form, you have an option to request a hearing if you want. The hearing is not done by a judge. The hearing is done by someone inside the VA regional offices, and they'll make 2 attempts to reach out to you and have essentially a telephone call or a video telephone call, where the purpose of that call is to see if you can add any additional information to provide the VA what they may think they needed. Couple quirky things about a high-level review. One is you cannot do back-to-back high-level reviews. If you use that option, you submit a high-level review, you're basically saying, I want a second opinion, and I think you got it wrong. And they come back and they say, nope, these conditions or this condition is still denied. You can't keep going back to them with another high-level review. Now you're forced into new and relevant evidence, the supplemental claim. I use a high-level review as a bridging strategy. If I need to buy time, remember how important that 1 year is after your claim is decided. You have that grace period, that 1 year to use any of your 3 appeal options. And if I think it's going to be a while for my veteran to get a trip out somewhere to see a specialist or develop new and relevant evidence, maybe they're trying to get witness statements of a buddy who was in combat, maybe this person's elderly or is difficult to get hold of. Whatever the reason, I think it might push us outside that year. Well, then I'll pull that trigger and use a high-level review to move that year bracket. Once we submit that appeal, we generate a new window. That window for the VA to decide the new decision, and then whatever their decision that comes back generates a whole new year. So you see how it can go. As long as you never break contact with the VA for over a year, you're in the fight. You have a viable appeal that preserves your effective claim date. So I know it gets confusing, but just remember, never let a year go by. If you have nothing else, do a high-level review. The third option has pros and cons. It's submitting your appeal to the Board of Veterans Appeals. Often we just say BVA, like Bravo Victor Alpha, Board of Veterans Appeals. BVA has some advantages. The first advantage being that a BVA appeal is decided by a federal veterans law judge. Those judges traditionally have a little more latitude. They can grant and not feel pinned down by granting you what you want because maybe it becomes precedent setting for the rest of the VA. That's not the case in BVA. Each individual veteran gets their decision, and it doesn't necessarily influence any other veteran's decisions. It's not probative. It's not policy changing, precedent setting like the higher courts are. So you kind of have the best of both worlds. You have a judge. That judge usually exercises a little more latitude. They may grant where the regional offices may not have granted. What's the downside? Well, the downside is clearly the waiting period. In the BVA, there's 3 ways you can have your appeal done. You can have what's called a direct review, where you're taking all the evidence and just sending it to BVA. You're not going, just your electronic file is going to the BVA. It gets reviewed by, in our case, the American Legion. The American Legion has a legal team that will do an appellate brief that'll basically, in lawyer speak, recapture the facts of the case in favor of the veteran, obviously, before it goes to the docket, before the judge looks at it. So that's the appellate brief, and then the BVA makes a decision, and the decision could be to grant, deny, or remand. So a remand is something new. The remand is really them pushing it back down to the regional office saying, in our review of this case, we found that you had missed something. You hadn't followed proper process. Maybe the C&P should have been done. Maybe some evidence wasn't considered. So there are times it will get remanded. It's not that uncommon that a BVA remand will say, push it back down to the VA regional office, have them do a new C&P. So think 3, maybe 4 years at BVA. If you want to submit new evidence to the BVA, there is a lane for that. It adds about another 6 months to the process. And if you want to actually have a hearing with the BVA, usually through a video conference, that can go 5 years. So that's the big downside. The one reminder I'd give you is that as long as you stay in the appeal process, you never let that year go by, even if you're at BVA and it takes a long, long, long time, and they grant the condition or conditions, well, then you're going to get back pay. You're going to get compensated for any of the increase that you were due for all the time you were waited. So there's that. Okay, let's talk about some frequently asked questions. The first one I get is, what happens if more than a year goes by? You've changed your mind and now 3 years since your last VA decision, you want to appeal something. You can. The problem is you lose your effective date of claim. Your new date of claim becomes your appeal date whenever you finally do submit that appeal. And you have to have new and relevant evidence. You don't have that high-level review option anymore. So we've already discussed what new and relevant evidence looks like. Another question is, can you use a supplemental claim for one issue, a high-level review for another issue? This would apply for claims where you claimed multiple conditions or issues, and you have some evidence to appeal some, and you might not have evidence to appeal the denial of others. Yes, you can. It's not an all or nothing. You could use them in combination, if you will. The things I'd like you to remember leaving this is, remember to preserve that 1 year. Look through your decision letter. There's a lot of nuggets in that decision letter that you can look at. All the little things like, did they characterize your dependency correctly? Are you a single veteran or veteran with dependents? Did they get your dates of service correct? Did they get the effective date correct? Did they remember that you may have done an intent to file and adjusted that effective date versus the time when the claim packet went in? Lots of little things to look for. As you go through, did the C&P examiner correctly represent you in the exam? With really important information like, did they use the right equipment? Did they measure your range of motion correctly, like using a geometer, or did they just kind of eyeball it? C&P exams are usually an area where there's a lot of variety and quality and professionalism and experience levels, so they tend to generate a lot of quality checks inside the VA to make sure that they're redone and done correctly, and they may be the cause for a bad rating. And remember, you can appeal not just for a denied service connection, but you can appeal for all of those things we just discussed, including the rating, the level of the rating. So you may think you were underrated. They gave you a 10%, you think, from your reading and your knowledge of the rating schedule, that you should be 20 or 30%, for example. You want to appeal that. You don't want it to be misinterpreted as a claim for increase. A claim for increase is something completely different. If you feel you were underrated from the very beginning, that the VA's first decision was too low, then that's something to appeal as well. So I hope this long video covered some of the things that might be in the back of your mind as you're reading your decision letter, as you're deciding what you want to do as far as the appeal is concerned. Use your VSOs. If you don't have a good VSO, go to that VA website, that URL. That'll give you all the tools that you need to submit your appeal. And I wish you the very best of luck on that.